The handcuffs closed around Ethan Carter's wrists at 9:47 on a Tuesday morning, and the woman who ordered it laughed out loud in front of 40 employees. "Take a good look, everybody," Victoria Sterling said. "This is what desperation smells like." Ethan didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just turned his head toward her and said 6 words that made her stop smiling for half a second. "I'd like my one phone call." She let him have it. She thought it was funny. 90 minutes later, a billion-dollar deal was frozen solid, and Victoria Sterling's empire had already started dying. She just didn't know it yet. Before we go on, do me a favor, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. And if you believe a quiet man carrying the truth is worth more than a rich woman carrying a title, subscribe and stay with me to the end. At 5:40 that morning, Ethan Carter was standing in his kitchen in Bellwood, Ohio, holding a folder he had read 400 times. Behind him, his daughter Lily came down the hallway in sock feet, 13 years old and already suspicious of him. "You're wearing the jacket," she said. "It's a jacket." "It's the jacket. The one you wore when you and Mom did the thing with the trucks." Ethan didn't answer right away. He poured coffee into a thermos that had lost its shine sometime during the Bush administration. "Eat something before the bus," he said. "Dad." "Lily." She sat down on the arm of the couch and looked at him the way her mother used to, steady, patient, immovable. "Are you in trouble?" "No." "Are you going to be in trouble?" He screwed the lid on the thermos. "I'm going to hand some paperwork to a company in Columbus, that's all. Paperwork." "Then why does your hand keep shaking?" He looked down. She was right. It was doing that thing again, the small tremor that had started 3 years ago in a hospital parking lot and never fully gone away. "Because I haven't eaten," he said. "Liar. Eat your cereal." She got up, went to the counter and stood next to him instead. She was almost to his shoulder now. That still surprised him every single morning. "Mom would have gone with you," Lily said quietly. Ethan let out a breath. "Yeah, she would have driven too. And she would have made me stop for gas station donuts." "So stop for donuts." "I don't have time for donuts, kid." "Then you don't have time to be scared," Lily said, and she went to get her backpack. And Ethan Carter stood in his kitchen for a good 10 seconds with his eyes closed because his 13-year-old had just said the truest thing anybody had said to him in a year. The drive was 2 hours and 11 minutes. He knew because he'd made it twice already, once to look at the building, once to sit in the parking garage and lose his nerve. Third time. That was the deal he'd made with himself. Third time you walk in Carter. Third time you hand it over and you're done. The folder rode in a backpack on the passenger seat. The same backpack he'd carried when he worked for the National Vehicle Safety Board. Back when a man could call him at midnight and say, "Carter, we've got a bad one," and he'd be on a plane by 6. That was before. Before Sarah. Before the thing that took her in 9 weeks. Before he learned that a man can win every professional fight of his life and still lose the only one that matters. He'd walked away from all of it. Took a job doing equipment inspections for a regional freight outfit. Made half the money. Got home by 5:30 every day. Made pancakes on Sundays. Went to every single one of Lily's volleyball games and sat in the bleachers with the other parents and didn't talk about what he used to do. And then in March, a man named Danny Whitcomb sat down across from him in a diner and slid an envelope across the table and said, "Ethan, I don't know anybody else." Danny was a welder. 58 years old, 2 knee replacements, and a granddaughter he was raising. "I'm not that guy anymore," Ethan had told him. "I know," Danny said. "I'm asking anyway." Aurelia Global's headquarters took up an entire block downtown, 41 floors of glass, with the company's name in brushed steel letters over the entrance, each letter taller than a man. Ethan parked 4 blocks away because the garage was $32 and he wasn't going to pay $32. He walked. Old work jacket canvas faded at the elbows. Jeans. Boots that had been resoled twice. The backpack over one shoulder. He stopped outside the revolving door and did the thing Sarah taught him to do before hard conversations. 3 breaths. In through the nose. Out slow. Then he went in. The lobby was the size of a church. Marble floor ceiling 4 stories up, a wall of water running down black stone behind the reception desk. Ethan walked to the desk. The young woman behind it was on a headset. She held up one finger without looking at him. He waited. She finished her call. Then she started another one. He waited some more. 2 men in suits walked past him toward the elevators. One of them glanced at Ethan's boots and then away fast the way people do. Finally, the receptionist looked up. Her name badge said Brittany. "Deliveries are on Grand Street," she said. "I'm not a delivery." "Oh." She adjusted her expression. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, ma'am. I need to submit documents to your compliance office. Compliance is internal. I understand that. There's a public submission requirement under Section 9 of your own federal contract. Any party can file a safety concern in writing, and your compliance officer has to log receipt within 24 hours. He set the folder on the counter. "I've got 2 copies. You keep one, you stamp the other, I go home." Brittany looked at the folder like it might be sticky. "Sir, I really can't accept documents from the public." "You legally can." "I'd have to check with..." "Then check with somebody. I'll wait. I've got all day." She picked up the phone. She turned slightly away from him while she spoke into it, which Ethan noticed because he'd spent 18 years noticing exactly that kind of thing. When she hung up, her voice had changed. Cooler. "Someone's coming down." "Thank you." "You can wait over there." She pointed at a bench near the doors, the furthest possible point from the elevators. Ethan didn't move. "I'll stand here if that's all right." "Sir." "I'm not causing a problem, ma'am. I'm just standing." The man who came down was maybe 35 in a suit that fit him the way suits fit people who have them altered. He introduced himself as Preston from Corporate Affairs. He did not offer to shake hands. "I understand you have some concerns," Preston said. "I have documents." "Right. Well, our concerns process runs through legal, so if you'll leave your contact information." "That's not what the process is." Ethan opened the folder and turned it around so Preston could see the first page. "Page 1 is your own compliance charter, paragraph 4. Read it." Preston did not look down at the page. "Sir." "Read it. It takes 11 seconds." "I don't need to read it." "Then you don't know what it says." Something flickered across Preston's face. Not anger. Something worse, the mild irritation of a man being delayed. "What is this actually about?" Preston said. "Are you a former employee?" "No." "Are you represented by counsel?" "No." "Are you press?" "No." "Then honestly, sir, I'm not sure what you expect to happen here." "I expect a stamp on a piece of paper," Ethan said. "That's the whole thing. That's my entire request. One stamp." Preston smiled the way people smile when they've decided the conversation is over. "I'll take the folder up, and someone will be in touch." Ethan closed the folder and put his hand flat on top of it. "No, sir," he said. "You'll take it, and it'll go in a drawer. I need it logged in front of me." "That's not going to happen." "Then we've got a problem." Later, a lot of people would argue about how loud Ethan Carter got in that lobby. The truth, according to the security footage that eventually made it onto every news channel in the country, is that he never raised his voice one time. He simply didn't leave. Preston went to the desk and made a call. 2 security officers came out of a side door, one older gray at the temples, one young enough to still be excited about the uniform. The older one, whose badge said Ray, walked up first. "Morning," Ray said. "Morning. They tell me you're not leaving." "They tell you why?" Ray glanced at the folder. "Nope. Aurelia's got a project going up in Marion County. 1,200 workers on site by fall. Structural steel welding bays, a hydrogen line running under the east floor." Ethan tapped the folder. The third-party inspection came back with 14 findings, 9 of them critical. What got filed with the state had 4 findings, and none of them critical. Ray's face didn't change, but his eyes did. "That's a hell of an accusation," he said. "It's not an accusation. It's 2 documents that don't match. That's arithmetic." Ray was quiet for a second. Then, "You a lawyer?" "I was an investigator. Federal. 18 years." And now? Now I inspect trailer brakes for a freight company and I make my kid do her homework. The younger guard was already reaching for his radio. Ray put a hand out and stopped him. How'd you get this? Ray asked. A welder gave it to me. Guy named Danny. He's the one who signed the original inspection. He tried to raise it internally 3 times. Ethan's jaw tightened, and it was the first crack in his calm all morning. They put him on nights. Then they put him on call. Then they told him his position was being restructured. He's 58 years old, Ray. He's got a granddaughter in the 2nd grade. Ray looked at the folder for a long moment. Then he said quietly, I've got a kid on that site. I know, Ethan said. That's why I'm standing here. That was the moment it might have gone differently. That was the moment Ray reached up toward his radio, not to call it in, but to call it off. And that was the exact moment the elevator opened and Victoria Sterling walked into the lobby. She was 52 years old in a charcoal suit that cost more than Ethan's truck, flanked by 3 people who moved when she moved and stopped when she stopped. She'd been on the cover of 2 magazines that year. She had taken Aurelia Global from a mid-cap manufacturer to a company with a market value north of $90 billion, and she had done it in 11 years, and there was not one person in that building who didn't know exactly how she felt about being interrupted. Preston, she said. Why is my lobby a waiting room? Preston hurried over. Ms. Sterling, it's handled. It's clearly not handled. It's standing right there. Ethan turned to face her. Ma'am, he said. Victoria looked him over. She took her time about it. The jacket, the boots, the backpack, the gray coming in at his temples. And then she did the thing that 100 million people would eventually watch on their phones. She laughed. It wasn't a cruel cackle. It was worse than that. It was a short, genuine, amused little laugh, the laugh of a woman who had just been told something mildly ridiculous. Oh, honey, she said. What do you want? I want to file a safety concern. With me. With your compliance office. Anybody with a stamp. And you drove here. In person. In that. She gestured vaguely at all of him. I did. Do you know what email is? I do. I also know what a drawer is. A few people in the lobby heard that. One of them made a sound like a swallowed laugh, and Victoria's head turned about 10 degrees, and the sound stopped. She stepped closer to Ethan, close enough that he could see she wasn't as calm as she was performing. Let me tell you what this is, she said. This is the 3rd one of these I've had this quarter. A man loses a contract or gets let go or doesn't get the promotion, and he decides he's a whistleblower. He prints something off the internet. He shows up. He wants somebody important to look at him. She tilted her head. How much? Excuse me. How much do you want? Because we can be done in 4 minutes. My general counsel can cut a check, and you can go buy your daughter something nice. Ethan went very still. How do you know I have a daughter? He said. Victoria blinked once. You all have daughters, she said. It's always a daughter. It's always a sick wife or a daughter. And Ray, standing 8 feet away, watched Ethan Carter's face. Do something he'd never seen a man's face do before. Go from warm to absolutely still, like a lake freezing over between 1 second and the next. My wife, Ethan said, died 3 years ago in March. The lobby got extremely quiet. Her name was Sarah. She was a 2nd grade teacher, and she'd have told me not to say that out loud to you because you didn't earn it. He picked up the folder. So let's go back to paperwork. There are 1,200 people going onto a job site in Marion County. 9 critical findings got erased between the inspector's report and the state filing. I'm not asking you to admit anything. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking one of your people to write down that I gave you this. That's it. Victoria held out her hand. Give it to me. I'll give you a copy when it's logged. Give it to me now. No, ma'am. Her hand stayed out for 1 more second, then it dropped. Call the police, she said. Preston hesitated. Ms. Sterling, there's cameras. Good. Let them film a trespasser being removed from private property. She turned back to Ethan. You had a chance to be smart. I've never been smart, Ethan said. Ask anybody. It took Columbus PD 11 minutes. In those 11 minutes, Ethan Carter did not move from the spot where he was standing. He held the folder against his chest with both hands. He looked at the floor. His lips moved once, and Ray was close enough to hear it, and what he heard was, "It's just paperwork, Sarah." The lobby filled up. Word travels through an office building faster than fire. People came out of the elevators and stood along the mezzanine railing and pretended to be walking somewhere. Phones came out. Nobody stopped them because Victoria was standing right there with her arms folded, and Victoria wanted them to see this. She wanted a story to travel through that building. She was going to get one. Two officers came through the revolving door. The senior one, heavy-set mustache, maybe 50, looked around the marble lobby and immediately looked tired. "Who called?" "I did," Victoria said. "This man is refusing to leave." The officer walked over to Ethan. "Sir, you got ID." Ethan handed him a driver's license. The officer read it again, and something changed in his shoulders. "Ethan Carter." He looked up. "Out of Bellwood." "Yes, sir." "NVSB." "Long time ago." "Huh." The officer handed the license back. "My brother-in-law drove a rig that had that steering column recall. 91,000 trucks." 94, Ethan said. "But yeah, that was you. That was a lot of people. I just did the math on it." The officer looked over at Victoria, then back at Ethan, and Ethan could see him doing arithmetic of a different kind. "Sir," the officer said lower now, "if you walk out that door right now, this is nothing. Nobody's charged, nobody's booked, you go home." "I know." "Then walk out the door." "I can't," Ethan said. "If I walk out that door, this goes away. That's what she's counting on. And in about 6 months, somebody's going to get hurt on that site, and everybody's going to say, 'Nobody knew.'" He shook his head slowly. "I knew. I'm the guy who knew." The officer stood there. "Officer," Victoria called across the lobby, "is there a problem?" The officer's jaw worked once. "No, ma'am," he said. And then quietly to Ethan, "I'm sorry about this." "Don't be," Ethan said. "You've got a job. Do it." He put his hands behind his back before they asked him to. The video that went viral, the one shot from the mezzanine, 40 feet up, slightly shaky, captures all of it in 81 seconds. It shows a man in an old canvas jacket putting his own wrists together behind his back. It shows the officer hesitating for almost 2 full seconds before closing the cuffs. It shows a folder falling out of the man's hand and papers sliding across black marble. It shows a woman in a charcoal suit, watching, arms folded. And then it shows her laugh. That's the frame. That's the one that ended up on every screen in America. Victoria Sterling head tipped back slightly, one hand rising to her mouth, laughing, while 40 of her own employees looked down from a balcony and did not laugh with her. "Take a good look, everybody," she said. "This is what desperation smells like." Somebody on the mezzanine said, "Jesus Christ." Victoria's head snapped up. "Who said that?" Nobody answered. They walked him toward the doors. Ray bent down and started gathering the scattered papers, and the younger guard bent to help him, and Ray said, "Don't, I got it," and put every single page back in order himself. Ethan stopped walking about 10 feet from the exit. "Officer," he said, "can I make my phone call?" "At the station." "I'd like to make it here." "Sir." "It's one call. It'll take 90 seconds. And I'd like her to hear it." The officer looked at Victoria. Victoria smiled. She was in a wonderful mood. "Oh, let him," she said. "Please, I want to know who he thinks is coming." The officer took Ethan's phone out of his jacket pocket, held it up, and unlocked it with Ethan's face. "Who am I calling? Contacts, R. Reynolds." The officer scrolled. "Got it. Speaker, if you don't mind." The officer hit the button, and in that enormous marble lobby with 100 people watching from the balconies and the floor, a phone rang out loud. Once. Twice. Victoria said to no one in particular, "This is the best morning I've had in a year." 3 times. Then, a woman's voice came through crisp and unhurried, and it filled the entire lobby. "Reynolds." "Maya," Ethan said. "It's Carter." There was a pause. About 1 second long. Then the voice said, "Ethan Carter." "Yeah. It's been 5 years." "I know." "You said, and I'm quoting you, 'Maya, don't ever call me again about work.'" "I remember." "So why am I hearing your voice at 10 in the morning?" Ethan took a breath. "Because I'm standing in the lobby of Aurelia Global," he said, "in handcuffs, and I need you to open a file." The lobby did not make a sound. And then Maya Reynolds' voice came back, and it was different. Every person in that room heard it change. It got flat and fast and very, very awake. "Say that again." "Aurelia Global, Corporate Headquarters, Columbus. I attempted to submit a documented safety disclosure under a federal contract compliance clause. They refused receipt. I was denied a logging officer. I've been arrested for trespass on the premises." "Are you being recorded right now?" "There are approximately 60 cell phones pointed at me." "Good," Maya said. "Ethan, listen to me carefully. Are you filing as a private citizen, or are you filing under continuing protection?" Ethan's eyes came up, slowly. And for the first time all morning, they found Victoria Sterling's. "Continuing protection," he said. The line was quiet for a beat. "Under the Whitcomb-Carter provision." "Yes, ma'am." "You understand what that does?" "I do." "Once I log this, I can't unlog it. It goes out automatically. Every institutional holder, every underwriter, every federal counterparty on their active contracts, inside the hour." "I understand." "Ethan." Maya's voice softened just slightly. "You swore you were done." Ethan looked at the officer holding his phone. He looked at Ray standing there holding a folder of papers like it was something breakable. He looked up at the balconies full of people who worked in that building and had families and mortgages and no idea what was in the ground under the Marion County site. "I've got a welder named Danny Whitcomb who can't get anybody to answer his emails," Ethan said. "So no, ma'am. I guess I'm not done." There was the sound of typing, very fast typing. "Give me your case number from 21. 4491 Delta." More typing. "Okay," Maya said. "It's open. Ethan, I'm going to need everything you have." "Ray's got it." "Who's Ray?" Ethan turned his head. "Security officer named Ray. Gray hair. He's holding the folder." There was a pause on the line, and then Maya Reynolds said very clearly, loud enough that the marble carried it into every corner of that lobby. "Ray, if you can hear me. My name is Maya Reynolds. I'm former chief investigator for federal contract compliance, and as of 90 seconds ago, those documents are part of an open federal file. If they leave your hands and go anywhere except to me, that's obstruction. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Ray did not look at Victoria. He looked straight ahead, and he said, "Yes, ma'am, I understand." Victoria Sterling stepped forward. "This is a stunt," she said. "This is theater. Preston, get legal down here." "Ms. Sterling." Maya's voice came out of the phone, and it was almost pleasant. "Is that you?" Victoria stopped. "I recognize your voice from the Senate hearing," Maya said. "You did very well. I want you to hear something because in about 4 minutes you're going to be extremely busy and you won't have time to listen to anybody. I have no interest in 2021, that man in your lobby closed an investigation that cost a manufacturer $11 billion and saved somewhere between 300 and 400 lives. Nobody knows his name. He wanted it that way. When he retired, the agency wrote him a permanent continuing disclosure protection so that if he ever picked the phone back up, we would never have to start from zero." A pause. "Ms. Sterling, he has never used it. Not once. In 5 years." Victoria said nothing. "I used it today," Maya said. "On you." The officer put the phone down. Nobody in that lobby moved. Ethan Carter stood there with steel on his wrists and looked at the woman who owned the building, and he didn't look angry, and he didn't look triumphant, and that was somehow the worst part. "Ma'am," he said, "I gave you 4 chances to take a piece of paper." Victoria Sterling opened her mouth. And upstairs on the 41st floor in an office she had not sat in for 3 hours, her phone began to ring. Then Preston's phone rang. Then the receptionist's desk phone rang. Then somewhere up on the mezzanine, a man's voice said, "What the hell is a Section 9 emergency alert?" And Victoria Sterling, the woman who had never once in 11 years been the second most important person in a room, turned and looked up at the balcony, and for the first time that morning, she wasn't smiling. At 10:04 that morning, 4 minutes after Maya Reynolds hung up the phone, the first email hit. It went to 11 institutional shareholders, 2 federal counterparties, 1 underwriting syndicate in New York, and a compliance desk in Zurich that nobody at Aurelia Global had ever spoken to directly. The subject line was 14 long and completely without drama. Notice of reopened federal disclosure file, contract reference 4491D, Aurelia Global Industries, Marion County facility. Preston read it standing in the middle of the lobby, with his thumb frozen over the screen. Ms. Sterling. Not now. Ms. Sterling, you need to see this. I said not now, Preston. Get the police report. I want his name on a formal complaint before he's out of the parking lot. Ma'am. Preston's voice cracked on the second syllable. Fidelity Northbridge just emailed. And Carawell. And the Ohio Treasurer's office. Victoria turned around. About what? About a compliance alert. On us. Behind them. The revolving door was still turning slowly from where the officers had taken Ethan Carter out onto the sidewalk. Half the lobby was still standing there. Nobody had gone back to work. 60 phones were still up. Victoria walked over, took Preston's phone out of his hand, and read it herself. She read it twice. Then she said in a voice that was almost conversational, "Who is Maya Reynolds?" "I don't know." "Find out." "Yes, ma'am." "And get that folder off my security guard." By 10:11. Ray Delgado was standing at the security podium with the folder pressed flat under both forearms, and Preston was on the other side of it talking fast. "Ray, I'm not asking. Hand it over." "Can't do that. It was recovered on company property. It's company property." "It's not." "Ray, you heard the woman on the phone same as I did." Ray didn't move. He'd been doing this job for 19 years, and he had a voice that never went up. "She said federal file. She said obstruction. Now you want to be the man who takes it off me, that's your business, but I'm going to say your name out loud when they ask me who took it." Preston stared at him. "You've got a pension here." "Yeah," Ray said. "And I've got a son who reports to the Marion County site on August 4th. That was the first sentence of the day that anybody said to Preston that he genuinely did not have an answer for. At 10:19, Ethan Carter sat in the back of a cruiser on Front Street with his hands behind him and his forehead against the window, and the officer in the front seat had not started the engine yet. "You okay back there?" "Yes, sir." "You want the AC?" "I'm fine." The officer, whose name was Dale Brogan, tapped the steering wheel twice with his thumb. "I've got to ask you something and you don't have to answer." "Go ahead." "Was any of that true, the Marion County thing?" "All of it." 9 critical findings. 9, Ethan said. Hydrogen line under a welding floor with no automated cutoff. That's number 3. Number 1 is worse. Brogan let out a long breath through his nose. Then he reached back, unlocked the cuff on Ethan's left wrist, and clicked it around the door handle instead. "Sit forward. Get your shoulders off it." "Thank you." "Don't tell anybody I did that." "No, sir." At 10:26 on the 41st floor, Victoria Sterling walked into a conference room where 6 people were already standing because nobody had the nerve to sit. "Somebody explain to me," she said, "how a man in a Carhartt jacket froze $800 million in 20 minutes. Nobody spoke. Anyone. Her general counsel, a man named Gerald Vance, who had been with the company since before her, cleared his throat. "It isn't frozen. Yet. Yet. The alert doesn't freeze anything on its own. What it does is trigger a review condition in the Marion County financing package. Northbridge has 96 hours to affirm or suspend. Then get Northbridge on the phone and have them affirm." Victoria. Gerald took his glasses off, which he only ever did when he was about to say something she wouldn't like. "Northbridge suspended 11 minutes ago." The room got very quiet. They what? They didn't wait. They saw the file reference, and they suspended pending independent verification, and Carawell followed at 10:16. He put the glasses back on. That's 440 million of the debt tranche. The rest will move by end of day unless we give them something. Then give them something. That's what I'm trying to do, which is why I need to ask you a question and I need a real answer. Gerald looked at her. What's in the folder? Victoria didn't blink. Nothing. Recycled complaints from a disgruntled contractor. You didn't read it. I didn't have to read it. Victoria. Gerald's voice dropped. You had a man arrested on camera while refusing to accept a safety disclosure. That's not a nuisance. That's a fact pattern. I need to know what's in that folder before a regulator tells me. Then go get it, Victoria said. It's downstairs in the hands of a security guard who apparently works for the federal government now. At 10:34, the video hit 200,000 views. It hit 1 million at 11:02. By noon, networks had it, and the frame they all used was the same frame. And it was not the frame of the handcuffs. It was the frame 2 seconds after, when a woman in a charcoal suit tipped her head back and laughed. At 10:41, Claire Donovan, Chief Financial Officer of Aurelia Global, was in a car on the way back from the airport when her phone rang for the 9th time in 6 minutes. She answered the 9th one because it was her deputy. Claire, are you seeing this? I'm seeing 40 missed calls is what I'm seeing. Northbridge suspended. Claire sat up. Say that again. Northbridge suspended on Marion County. Compliance trigger. There's a federal file open on the site inspections. That's impossible. We cleared the state filing in April. I signed the certification myself. There was a pause on the line. Yeah, her deputy said. That's kind of the thing, Claire. Claire Donovan was 54 years old, and she had signed exactly one document in her career that she had ever lost sleep over, and it had not been this one. She had signed the Marion County Compliance Certification on the 11th of April at 4 in the afternoon on the strength of a summary memo that said 4 findings, none critical. Pull the source inspection, she said. I tried. The vendor file's locked to operations. Then unlock it. I don't have rights. I do. Claire leaned forward toward the driver. Take me to the office, not the house, the office. At 10:52, Maya Reynolds was standing in a rented office in Alexandria, Virginia, with 3 laptops open and a cold cup of coffee, saying into a headset, No, I don't want to comment. I want the transmittal log. The transmittal log tells me who touched the document between the vendor and the state. That's it. That's the whole request. Whoever was on the other end said something. I understand it's a lot of records, Maya said. It's also a hydrogen line under a welding floor, so I'd say we're even on inconvenience. She hung up and immediately dialed again. Danny Whitcomb. My name is Maya Reynolds. I got your number from Ethan Carter. A long pause on the line. Is he all right? Danny said. He's in a squad car. Oh, God. Mr. Whitcomb, I need you to listen to me. Are you somewhere you can talk? I'm in my truck outside a Kroger. Good. Stay there. Do you have the original vendor report? Not the copy you gave Ethan. The original with the vendor's signature block. Danny didn't answer. Mr. Whitcomb. I've got something better, Danny said quietly. I've got the email where they told me to change it. Maya put her hand flat on the desk. Say that one more time. March 19th, from the site director. He wrote it out. He said, and I can read it to you word for word, because I've read it about 1,000 times. He said, Dan, we need the finding count under 5 for the state package. Consolidate items 3 through 11 into a single observation and downgrade severity. This comes from above me. You have that in writing. I've got it printed, and I've got it in a Yahoo account my son set up for me in 2009, and I never deleted anything in my whole life. Maya closed her eyes for 1 second. Mr. Whitcomb, she said, do not go to work today. Do not answer your work phone. Do not talk to anyone from Aurelia. I'm going to send you a name and an address, and I want you to drive there and hand that email to a human being. Am I in trouble? No, sir, Maya said. You're the reason 1,200 people aren't. At 11:15, Victoria Sterling did the thing that Gerald Vance begged her not to do. She went downstairs, walked past 40 employees who had not gone back to their desks, stopped in the middle of the lobby, and gave an unscheduled statement to two reporters who had shown up outside. This morning, a man refused to leave private property and was removed by Columbus police. That's all that happened. He's a former federal employee with a history of pursuing companies for personal profit. He has been shopping these allegations for months, and this is a shakedown that failed. She smiled tight. Aurelia Global stands behind every inspection at every one of our facilities. We're going to keep building, that's it. One of the reporters said, "Ma'am, did you accept the documents he was trying to file?" There were no documents. There was a folder. Did you look in the folder? I'm not going to dignify that. Ma'am, one more. Do you know that the video of you laughing has 4 million views? Victoria's expression did not change, but she stopped talking, and she turned, and she walked back inside, and Preston later said that the sound of her heels crossing that marble was the loudest thing he had ever heard in his life. At 11:31, a woman on the 12th floor named Renata Osai, who had worked in Aurelia's internal audit group for 6 years and had never once spoken to an executive, sent a message on the company chat to a coworker. She wrote, "I pulled the Marion vendor file in March for a QA sample. I saved a copy to my drive. It's got 14 findings on it." Her coworker wrote back, "Delete that." Renata wrote, "I already screenshotted it." Her coworker wrote, "Renata, delete it." Renata sat there for 90 seconds looking at the screen. Then she opened a new email, typed her own personal address in the to field, attached the file, and sent it to herself. Then she got up and went to the bathroom and stood at the sink for a while, with her hands shaking. At 11:48, Ethan Carter was released without charges. Nobody explained it to him. A sergeant came out, handed him his belt and his wallet and his phone, and said, "Complainant declined to sign." She declined. Legal declined for her. The sergeant almost smiled. "You want my advice, Mr. Carter? Get a lawyer before dark." "I don't have money for a lawyer." "Santuar," the sergeant said. "After this morning, I don't think that's going to be your problem." Ethan walked out onto the sidewalk into daylight and stood there for a second because he genuinely did not know which direction his truck was in. Then his phone rang in his hand, and the screen said, "Lily School," and his stomach dropped straight through the concrete. "This is Ethan Carter." "Mr. Carter, this is Peggy at the front office at Bellwood Middle. Everything's fine, honey. Nobody's hurt." "What happened?" "Lily's here in the office. She's okay. She's just well." Peggy lowered her voice. "Some of the kids were showing a video, and she got upset, and she got up and left class, and she's sitting here with me now." Ethan closed his eyes. "Can I talk to her?" There was a rustle. Then his daughter's voice, very small and very angry, and both at the same time. "Dad." "Hey, kid. They handcuffed you." "Yeah." "In front of everybody." "Yeah." "You said it was paperwork." "It was paperwork," Ethan said. "That's the part that made her mad." Lily made a sound that was half a laugh and half something else. "Ashley Werner's mom works at a bank, and Ashley said you're a criminal." "What'd you say?" "I said her mom's bank got fined for money laundering in 2019. Ethan stopped walking on the sidewalk in downtown Columbus and put his hand over his eyes. "Lily. It's true. I looked it up at lunch. You are so much like your mother, it scares me. Are you coming home?" "I'm coming home." "Dad?" Her voice changed. Got younger. "Are we going to be okay?" And Ethan Carter, standing outside a police station with a dead phone battery warning on his screen, said the only honest thing he had. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I'm not sorry." At 12:20, Claire Donovan got into the vendor file. It took her 4 minutes with her own credentials and an override she had authority to use and had never used. She opened the original PDF from the third-party inspection firm Halloway Structural, dated March 11th. 14 findings. 9 flagged critical. She scrolled to page 31 and found the one Ethan had described in the lobby, the one Ray had heard him say out loud, and she read it 3 times. Then she opened the state filing, the one with her name on it, the one she had certified on April 11th. 4 findings. 0 critical. Claire Donovan sat back in her chair and said out loud to an empty office, "Oh, you sons of bitches. At 12:41, she called Gerald Vance. "Gerald, it's Claire. Are you alone?" "Nobody's alone today." "Get alone." There was the sound of a door. "Go." "The certification I signed in April is false," Claire said. "The underlying report has 14 findings and 9 criticals. The summary memo I was given had 4 and 0. Somebody consolidated them and downgraded severity between the vendor and my desk." Gerald didn't say anything for a long moment. "Who prepared the summary memo?" "Operations." "Who in operations?" "That's the interesting part," Claire said. "The memo has no author field. It's a PDF with the metadata stripped. Gerald, somebody deliberately stripped the metadata off a document before handing it to the CFO for certification." "Claire, I signed it. My name is on a false filing to the state of Ohio." "Claire, listen to me. Don't move on this yet. Don't move. We need to control the sequence. If you self-report before we understand the exposure, you hand a prosecutor a roadmap." Claire laughed once, and there was nothing funny in it. "Gerald, 1,200 people go on that floor in August." "I understand that." "Do you?" "Because this morning our CEO had a man arrested for trying to hand us the thing I just found on my own server, and she laughed while it happened, and it's on 4 million phones." Claire stood up. "I'm not going to be the woman who knew." At 1:15, the board's lead independent director, a retired Navy admiral named Charles Boyd, who lived in Charleston and famously did not like phone calls, called Victoria Sterling directly. "Victoria." "Charlie. I've had 6 calls in an hour, and I answered all of them, which you know I don't do." "It's contained." "Is it?" "It's a nuisance filing by a man with a grudge and a very good publicist." "Victoria." Boyd's voice was flat as a table. "I watched the video. I'm 71 years old and I have watched a lot of men be arrested in my life. That man put his own hands behind his back." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Meaning?" "Meaning nobody does that unless he came in expecting it. Which means he had a plan. Which means you walked into it in front of 40 of your own employees and you laughed." A pause. "Now, tell me what's in the folder." "Charlie, I don't know what's in the folder because it's noise." "Then get it and read it and call me back in 2 hours. "And if I don't?" "Then I'll assume you already know," Boyd said, "and I'll make different calls." At 1:52, Maya Reynolds landed in Columbus. She had a bag, a laptop, and a printed copy of Danny Whitcomb's email, which she had read on the plane 11 times. She called Ethan from the curb. "Where are you?" "Halfway home. I've got to get my kid." "Get your kid, then turn around and come back." Maya. "Ethan, I'm not asking you to fight. I'm asking you to sit in a room with me and answer questions for 4 hours, because at some point tonight, a federal attorney is going to ask me whether the man who initiated this is credible. And I want to be able to say I looked him in the eye." "You already know I'm credible." "I do," Maya said. "They don't. And Ethan, there's something else, and I want to say it to you straight instead of letting you find out." "Say it." "They've hired Kessner Rydell." Ethan didn't say anything. "You know what that means." "Yeah." "They're not going to argue about hydrogen lines," Maya said. "They're going to argue about you. They're going to go get your personnel file from 2019. They're going to find the 6 weeks you took off after Sarah died, and they're going to call it a psychiatric leave. They're going to find that you drove to that building twice before you went in, and they're going to call it surveillance. They're going to put your daughter's name in a deposition to see if it makes you flinch. Let them put her name in it." "Ethan." "They can say whatever they want about me," Ethan said. "I stopped caring what people said about me in a hospital hallway 3 years ago. There's not a lawyer alive who can hurt me worse than a Tuesday in March." There was a silence on the line. "All right," Maya said. "Come back tonight." At 2:30, Victoria Sterling finally read the folder. Preston had gotten it not from Ray, but the way things actually happen in corporations, which is to say, a lawyer called a lawyer, and an agreement was signed, and a scanned copy was produced under a preservation letter with Ray standing right there, watching it happen, page by page. Victoria read it alone in her office with the door shut. She read for 18 minutes. At 2:48, she came out and said to her assistant, "Get me Marcus Hale." Marcus Hale was the Marion County site director, the man whose name was on the email. He came up at 3:20. Marcus, sit down. Victoria, before you start, I want to say I think this is completely blown out of proportion. Sit. He sat. She slid one page across the desk. The consolidated summary memo. 4 findings. Did you prepare this? My team did. Did you prepare it? Marcus's throat moved. I approved it. On the 11th of April, you sent this to Claire Donovan for certification. That's the standard process. Marcus. Victoria's voice was very calm and very quiet, and it was according to the man himself. Later, the single most frightened thing he had ever heard in his life. Did you instruct anyone to reduce the finding count? I instructed the team to present the findings in a usable format. That's not an answer. Victoria, we had a financing close on the 22nd. If 9 criticals go into the state package, Northbridge pulls the tranche and the whole thing slips 2 quarters. You said, and I'm quoting you from the March 4th call, you said, quote, I don't want anything in the package that gives Northbridge a reason to blink. Victoria went absolutely still. I said that about the marketing deck. You said it about the package. I said it about the deck, Marcus. Well, Marcus Hale said, and his hands were shaking on his knees. That's not how I heard it. And that was the moment Victoria Sterling understood for the first time all day that she was not managing a scandal. She was standing inside one. At 3:41, she picked up her phone and called Gerald Vance and said 4 words she had never said in 11 years. Gerald, I need help. At 4:15, Claire Donovan walked into Victoria's office without knocking. I want to talk to you before I do something. Claire, I'm in the middle of. I know what you're in the middle of. I'm the one who found it. Victoria looked up. Say that again. The certification I signed in April was based on a doctored summary. The original vendor report has 14 findings and 9 criticals. Somebody stripped the metadata off the memo before it came to me. Claire stayed standing. Victoria, I've got a name on my signature line and I'm going to fix it. I'm telling you as a courtesy, not as a request. Fix it how? Fix it. I'm going to file a corrective certification with the state, and I'm going to do it tomorrow morning at 9, and I'm going to inform the audit committee tonight. You'll destroy the financing. The financing is already gone. You'll destroy the company. No, Claire said. You did that at 9:47 this morning when you laughed. Victoria stood up so fast her chair rolled back into the window. Don't you dare. I watched it 14 times. Claire's voice never rose. Do you know what I kept looking at, not you? The balcony. 40 of our people looking down, and not one of them laughed with you. Not one, Victoria. That's the part you should be afraid of. Claire, I've worked for you for 9 years, and I have defended you in rooms where it cost me. You are the smartest person I've ever met. Claire picked up her folder. And this morning a man came to our door with the truth in his hands, and you had him put in handcuffs because his jacket was old. She walked to the door. Claire, wait. Claire stopped. Victoria stood there in her own office and for a full 5 seconds could not produce a sentence. Finally, she said, What was his name? Claire turned around slowly. You still don't know his name. Claire, what was his name? Ethan Carter. Carter, Claire said. And Victoria, before you say another word, you should probably know he's the man who did the steering column recall in 2021. She let that sit. The one your father's company was a supplier on. That recall is the reason we got the Marion County contract in the first place, because the primary bidder went under. Victoria did not move. He built the ground you're standing on, Claire said, and you had him arrested on it. At 5:03, Renata Osai, from Internal Audit, sent her screenshotted vendor file to a reporter at the Columbus Dispatch, then sat in her car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, and then drove home, and told her husband she thought she might have just ended her career. At 5:40, Danny Whitcomb handed a printed email to a woman named Maya Reynolds in the lobby of a Hampton Inn, and Maya read it standing up, and then she sat down on a luggage cart because her legs went out from under her. Mr. Whitcomb. Yes, ma'am. Do you understand what this is? It's an email. It's a written instruction from a site director to downgrade 9 critical safety findings ahead of a financing close, Maya said. Mr. Whitcomb, in 22 years, I have never had one of these handed to me. Not once. People delete these. Danny took his hat off and turned it around in his hands. I'm not smart about computers, he said. I just never throw anything away. At 6:15. Ethan Carter pulled into his driveway in Bellwood, and there were 2 news vans on his street and a woman with a microphone walking up his lawn before he got the door open. Mr. Carter, do you have a comment on Aurelia Global calling you a professional litigant? No, ma'am. Mr. Carter, 4 million people have watched you get arrested this morning. Anything you want to say to them? Ethan stopped with his hand on the truck door. He looked at the camera for a second, and then passed it at his own front window, where a 13-year-old girl was standing with the curtain pulled back, watching her father come home. Yeah, he said. One thing. The reporter leaned in. Somebody at that company knew, Ethan said. Not the CEO. I don't know what she knew, but somebody in that building took 9 critical safety findings and turned them into 4. And they did it on purpose, and they wrote it down somewhere because people always write it down. He opened his truck door. So to whoever that is, you've got about a day. After that, it stops being your decision. He went inside and closed the door. At 6:22, in an office on the 41st floor, a phone buzzed on a desk where nobody was sitting, and Marcus Hale, alone in his car in the parking garage 6 floors below, opened his laptop, logged into his work email, and started scrolling backward through March, looking for one message, hoping it was gone. At 6:24 he found it. It was not gone. And at 6:31, his hands shaking so badly he had to type his password 3 times. Marcus Hale forwarded that email to his personal account, then to his brother-in-law. Then closed the laptop and sat in the dark of a parking garage with his forehead on the steering wheel, whispering the same 3 words over and over. She said it, she said it, she said it. At 6:31. That evening, while Marcus Hale sat in a parking garage, whispering into his own steering wheel, Maya Reynolds was 3 miles away in a hotel conference room she had rented with a personal credit card, laying 11 documents in a row across a folding table. Ethan came in at 7:15 with his daughter. Maya looked up. You brought her. There were 2 news vans on my street, Ethan said. I wasn't leaving her with a neighbor so somebody could put a camera in her face. Hi, Lily said. Maya took off her glasses. You're Lily. Yes, ma'am. Your dad talked about you 5 years ago. You were 8, and you had a broken arm, and you were furious about it. I fell off a dugout. He told me. He said you were mad at the dugout. Maya pointed at a chair in the corner. Sit there. Do your homework. Don't listen. I'm going to listen. I know you are, Maya said. I just have to say it. They worked for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Maya asked him the same question 11 different ways, and Ethan answered it 11 times the same. And at 9:50, she finally sat back and said, Okay. Okay what? Okay, you're going to survive a deposition. She rubbed her eyes. Ethan, I need to prepare you for tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Claire Donovan files a corrective certification with the state at 9 in the morning. Ethan set down his coffee. Who? Their CFO. She found the doctored memo on her own this afternoon, and she's putting her name on the correction. Maya almost smiled. Which means by 10 a.m., Aurelia Global will have formally told the state of Ohio that its own April filing was false. That's not a lawsuit anymore. That's a criminal referral waiting for somebody to sign it. Then it's over. It's not over. Maya, Ethan, listen to me. A false filing gets you a fine and a consent decree. It gets a site director indicted maybe. It does not touch a CEO, and it does not stop that building from opening in August, because right now the entire fight is about whether anybody at the top knew. Maya tapped the table twice. Everything comes down to one question. Did Victoria Sterling know there were 9 criticals before that state package went out? Does she? I don't know, Maya said. And that scares me because if she didn't, she survives this. She fires 4 people cries on a morning show, keeps the company, Keeps the site, opens it in November instead of August, and your welder loses his job for nothing. At 10:20, Lily Carter, who had been listening the entire time, said from the corner without looking up from her math book, "Ask the security guard." Both adults turned. "What?" "The guy who wouldn't give up the folder. Dad said he has a son on the site." Lily shrugged. "People who won't give up a folder usually know other stuff." Maya looked at Ethan. Ethan said, "She's 13. "She's right," Maya said, and picked up her phone. At 11:52, Ray Delgado answered his phone in his kitchen in Grove City, with his boots still on. "Mr. Delgado, my name is Maya Reynolds." "I know your voice, ma'am. I heard it on speaker this morning. I need to ask you something and you're free to hang up." "Go ahead." "Does that lobby have audio?" Ray was quiet. "Mr. Delgado?" "The lobby cameras are video only," Ray said slowly. "But the executive floor conference rooms record audio on every scheduled call. It's a compliance thing. It's been that way since before she got there." Maya sat down very carefully. "Every scheduled call?" "Yes, ma'am. Retained 90 days rolling and longer if it's flagged to a financing matter. March 4th would be outside 90 days. "It would be," Ray said, "unless it was flagged to a financing matter." At 12:14 in the morning, Marcus Hale sent an email to an address Maya had posted on a public compliance portal 5 years earlier and never taken down. The subject line said, "I want to talk before somebody else does." At 6:40 that morning, Maya called Ethan and woke him on his own couch. He blinked. Who blinked? The site director, Marcus Hale. He wants a meeting, and he wants a lawyer in the room, and he wants it before 9. Ethan sat up. "Before Claire files." "Before Claire files." At 7:50, Victoria Sterling walked into the 41st floor and found Gerald Vance already sitting in her office. "Gerald." "Claire files at 9. "I know." "You could stop her." "How?" "Terminate her at 8:55, Gerald said. "Revoke her authority. A corrective certification from a former officer has no standing. It buys us 4 weeks. Victoria stood by her desk with her coat still on. "You're telling me to fire my CFO for correcting a false filing?" "I'm telling you what's available. You asked me for help yesterday. That's help." "Gerald." She set her bag down. "Do you think I knew?" Gerald Vance took his glasses off. "I think," he said, "that you have never once in 9 years asked a question you didn't want the answer to. And I think a jury can be made to understand the difference between not knowing and not asking, but I've never seen one bother." At 8:55, Victoria did not fire Claire Donovan. At 9:04, the corrective certification hit the Ohio Department of Commerce, and by 9:40, the Columbus Dispatch had it alongside Renata Osai's screenshot, alongside the 14 finding vendor report, alongside a photograph of a man in an old canvas jacket putting his own hands behind his back. The stock opened down 9%. By 10:15 it was down 22. At 10:40, Admiral Charles Boyd called an emergency session of the Aurelia Global Board of Directors to be held at 4 o'clock that afternoon in person in Columbus, and told his assistant to book 8 flights. At 11 o'clock, Victoria Sterling's assistant knocked on her door and said, "There's a call for you, and I think you should take it." "From who?" "A woman named Maya Reynolds." Victoria looked at the phone for a long moment. Then she picked it up. "This is Sterling. Ms. Sterling, I'd like to arrange a meeting between you and Ethan Carter." "Absolutely not." "He doesn't want it either," Maya said. "For the record," he said, and I'm quoting him, "I've got nothing to say to that woman that a document doesn't say better. I'm the one asking." "Why?" "Because I've been doing this for 22 years, and I've watched 11 companies go through what's happening to you right now, and there's a moment in every one of them where the person at the top decides whether they're going to be a defendant or a witness." A pause. "That moment is today, Ms. Sterling. It's not tomorrow." Victoria's hand was flat on her desk. "Where?" she said. At 1:20 that afternoon, Ethan Carter walked back into the lobby of Aurelia Global for the second time in 26 hours. Nobody stopped him. That was the part he wasn't ready for. Nobody stopped him, and the receptionist named Brittany stood up when he came through the door, and she didn't say anything, and her eyes were red, and she just stood there behind that desk like a soldier. Ray Delgado met him at the elevator. "Mr. Carter." "Ray, you didn't have to say my name to that federal woman yesterday. You were holding the folder." "I've been holding folders in this building for 19 years, Ray said. "That's the first time anybody said my name out loud in one." The elevator opened. Ray put his hand on the door and did not step in. 41st floor, conference room C. He hesitated. "Mr. Carter, whatever she offers you." "Ray." "My boy reports August 4th. "I know," Ethan said. "Nobody's reporting anywhere on the 4th. At 1:31, Victoria Sterling and Ethan Carter sat across a table from each other for the first time. Gerald Vance was there. Maya Reynolds was there. Nobody else. Victoria spoke first. "I'm told I should apologize." "You're not going to," Ethan said. "So let's not spend 20 minutes on it." Gerald slid a folder across the table. It was Ethan noticed almost exactly the size of the one he had carried in the day before. "Mr. Carter, what's in front of you is a settlement and mutual release. The number is $11 million. It's paid in 3 tranches over 18 months. There's no admission of liability. There's a non-disparagement clause, and there's a non-disclosure provision covering the underlying documents." Ethan didn't touch it. "Mr. Carter, how long is the non-disclosure?" "Perpetual. So I take $11 million, say the words hydrogen line again, as long as I live." That's a colorful way to put it. "Is it inaccurate?" Gerald didn't answer. Ethan turned the folder around with one finger and pushed it back across the table. "No, thank you." Victoria leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, I don't think you understand what's being offered. $11 million. After tax, that is generational money. That's your daughter's college, her graduate school, her house, her children's college. You will never fill out a form about money again in your life." "I understand what it is." "Then explain it to me," Victoria said, and there was something raw underneath her voice for the first time. "Because I have made 240 offers in 11 years, and I have never once had a man in your position say no, and I would genuinely like to understand what it is you think you're buying with this." Ethan sat back. "You want the real answer." "I want the real answer." "There's a welder named Danny Whitcomb," Ethan said. 58 years old. He signed the original inspection. He raised it 3 times inside your company and got moved to nights and then to on-call and then got told his position was restructured. He raises a granddaughter. His wife has diabetes and the insurance was through your company. He put both hands flat on the table. "Ma'am, Danny Whitcomb doesn't have a lawyer. He doesn't have a publicist. He doesn't have a private meeting with a CEO on the 41st floor. Nobody is going to offer that man $11 million because nobody has to. So this is about him." "It's about the 1,200 people behind him," Ethan said. "They've got exactly one thing going for them, and it isn't money, and it isn't lawyers, and it sure as hell isn't luck. It's that somebody who saw the paperwork was willing to say what was in it out loud." He shook his head slowly. "The second I take your money, they've got nothing. That's what your $11 million actually buys, Ms. Sterling. It buys their one thing." Nobody in the room said anything for a while. Then Victoria said quietly, "$25 million. No. 40. "Ma'am." "Name it," Victoria said, and her voice cracked on it, and everyone at that table heard it crack. "Name a number. I'm serious. There is a number." "There isn't. There is always a number." "Not for this," Ethan said. "And I think that's the part that's actually frightening you, and I don't say that to be cruel. I think you've spent 11 years believing everybody has a price, because everybody you've ever met has had one. And if I've got one too, then this is just a bad quarter." He stood up. "But I don't. So it isn't." At 1:52, Victoria Sterling stopped negotiating and started threatening. "Sit down, Mr. Carter." "I'm done." "Sit down." He didn't sit, but he stopped. "Kestner Reidel has been on this since yesterday at noon," Victoria said. "Do you know what they found in 19 hours? They found that you took 6 weeks of unpaid leave in 2019, and that the paperwork for it went through occupational health. They found 2 visits to this building before you came inside. They found that a welder gave you a company document, which in this state is a conversion of trade secrets, and that you drove it across county lines, which makes it federal. Victoria, Gerald said. They found that you are unemployed as of 8 this morning because your freight company terminated you for cause after we sent them a preservation letter. Ethan's face did not move, but his hand did. The tremor came back and he put it in his jacket pocket. They found, Victoria said, that your daughter's school records list you as sole guardian, and that a sole guardian who is unemployed and facing federal exposure is a very interesting thing to a county family services office. Maya Reynolds stood up so fast her chair went over. Say the next word. I didn't say anything. You said enough that I'm going to put it in an affidavit tonight. Put whatever you want in an affidavit, Victoria said. It's a description of facts. And then Ethan Carter laughed. It was not a big laugh. It was one short breath through his nose, and it was, according to Gerald Vance, the most unnerving sound in that entire 2-day disaster. Ma'am, Ethan said, you just made a mistake, and I want to be fair to you and tell you what it was. Enlighten me. Up until 11 seconds ago, I had every intention of never mentioning my wife to you again. He took his hand back out of his pocket. Sarah Carter, 2nd grade teacher, Bellwood Elementary, 14 years. She died on March 19, 2023. She was 40. And in the last 9 weeks of her life, I sat in a chair by a bed and I promised her one thing. One, because that's all I could think of to give her. He looked at Victoria Sterling. I promised her I'd raise Lily to be somebody who does the right thing when it costs. Mr. Carter, do you know what happens if I take your money? His voice never rose. My daughter finds out. Not tomorrow. 10 years, 20 years she finds out because they always find out. And then everything I ever told her about her mother becomes a story, a man told to make himself feel better. He picked up his backpack. You threatened me with family services. Ma'am, I've already lost the thing you can't threaten me with. There's nothing left on the shelf. He walked to the door. At 1:59, with his hand on the handle, Ethan Carter turned around. One more thing and then I'm gone. Say it. You keep asking everybody in this building whether you knew, he said. I've heard it 3 times through 3 different people since yesterday. Did Victoria know? Did Victoria know? He looked at her. Ma'am, I don't have to prove you knew. Then you don't have a case. I have to prove you didn't want to. Victoria went still. March 4th, Ethan said. Financing call. 11 participants. Your compliance system flags every call attached to a financing matter and holds it past the 90-day window. He watched her face. Marcus Hale gave a proffer this morning at 8:15. He described that call under penalty. And at 9:45, a federal preservation order went to your IT vendor for the audio. That's not possible. It's already done. Gerald Vance said in a completely different voice. Victoria, what's on the call? She didn't answer. Victoria. I said what I always say, she said. I said I didn't want anything in the package that gave Northbridge a reason to blink. I was talking about the presentation deck. That's not what Marcus proffered, Ethan said. Then Marcus is lying to save himself. Maybe he is. That's what the audio's for. At 2:06. Maya Reynolds pulled a single sheet out of her bag and set it in the middle of the table and did not slide it toward anybody. Ms. Sterling, that's a transcript excerpt. 41 seconds of a call your company recorded, retained, and produced under order this morning at 11:15. Your outside counsel already has it. I'd genuinely have expected somebody to walk it in here by now. Gerald reached for it. Victoria said, "Don't." He read it anyway. Gerald Vance read 41 seconds of a phone call from 4 months earlier, and then he set the page down and took his glasses off and put them on the table and rubbed both eyes with the heels of his hands, and he said, "Oh, Victoria." Gerald. "Oh, Victoria." At 2:08, Ethan Carter said the thing that ended it. Marcus Hale told you there was a problem with the criticals, he said. Not in writing, on that call. He said, quote, We've got a count issue on the criticals, and it's going to be ugly for the package. Ethan's voice was very quiet. And you said, quote, Marcus, I don't want to know. Get it where it needs to be, and I don't want to know. The room did not make a sound. That's the whole thing, Ethan said. That's all of it. 6 words. I don't want to know. He shouldered his backpack. Ms. Sterling, I've spent 18 years reading these files, and I'll tell you something for free, because you asked me a real question earlier, and I think you deserve a real answer. It's almost never the villain. It's almost never a person who wants people hurt. It's a person who has one bad afternoon and decides that not knowing is the same as not doing. Victoria Sterling looked at the table. 1,200 people, Ethan said. August 4th. And Ray downstairs has a boy on the list. He opened the door. Mr. Carter. He stopped. Victoria didn't look up. Was it 9 criticals? She said. Or was it 14 findings? I've heard both and I don't actually know which. Ethan stood in the doorway for a second. Ma'am, he said. That's the first question you've asked in 2 days that had a right answer to it. It's 14 findings, 9 of them critical, and the worst one is number 1, and it's not the hydrogen line. He let the door swing. It's the roof loading over Bay 3. If that goes, it goes on a shift change. Then he left. At 2:41, Claire Donovan called an emergency meeting of the audit committee and released the complete internal audit file to all 11 board members, unredacted, including the metadata report showing that the author field on the April summary memo had been stripped on the 10th of April at 6:52 p.m. from a workstation registered to the Marion County site office. At 3:10, Renata Osai was called to the 12th floor and told to bring her laptop, and she rode the elevator up with her whole career in her hands. And Claire Donovan met her at the door and said, Ms. Osai, I'm going to ask you to say out loud what you did, and then I'm going to ask you to say it again to 11 people in a room, and I want you to know before you decide that I will not let anything happen to you. Renata said, I sent it to a reporter. I know you did. Am I fired? You're promoted, Claire said. Effective when I can get somebody to sign it. Come on. At 3:32, Ethan Carter got a phone call in a parking garage. Mr. Carter, this is Dale Brogan, Columbus PD. I put you in a car yesterday. I remember, officer. I just wanted to tell you something, and then I'm going to hang up because I'm not supposed to be calling you. Brogan cleared his throat. My sergeant pulled the body cam and the lobby footage for the report. And there's a piece at the end that nobody's seen because the phones on the balcony were all pointed at you. Okay. After they walked you out and after the phone call, there's about 40 seconds where that lobby is dead quiet. A pause. And then one of the maintenance guys starts clapping. Just one guy. And then it's everybody. It's the whole balcony, Mr. Carter. It's about 100 people clapping in the lobby of the building that just had you arrested, and she's standing in the middle of it. Ethan didn't say anything. I've been a cop for 26 years, Brogan said. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Anyway, that's all. You take care of your kid. At 4 o'clock, the Aurelia Global Board of Directors convened in a conference room on the 39th floor, and Admiral Charles Boyd, who had flown up from Charleston that morning, said, We're going to do this in the order I say, and nobody is going to interrupt me. Claire, you first. Claire Donovan spoke for 19 minutes. Renata Osai spoke for 6. Gerald Vance spoke for 11, and at minute 9, he read 41 seconds of a transcript out loud into a silent room. And at minute 10, a director from Minneapolis named Ellen Park said, Say that last part again. Gerald said it again. I don't want to know. Ellen Park put her pen down. At 5:22, they brought Victoria Sterling in. She sat at the far end of the table, which she had never done in 11 years, and Boyd said, Victoria, I'm going to give you as long as you want, and I'm not going to cut you off. Tell us what happened. And Victoria Sterling, who had testified before the United States Senate, who had done 400 earnings calls, who had once talked an activist fund out of a proxy fight in a single dinner, opened her mouth and found that there was nothing in it. She sat there for 11 seconds. Then she said, I said I didn't want to know. We heard the recording. I know you did. Did you understand what he was telling you on that call? Yes, Victoria said. Ellen Park made a small sound. Yes, I understood him, Victoria said. I understood that Marcus was about to put 9 critical findings in front of me, 18 days before a financing close, and I understood that once he said them out loud, I would have to act on them, and I understood that acting on them meant a 2-quarter slip and a $3 billion write-down, and a very bad conversation with every person in this room. She looked at her own hands. So I told him I didn't want to know, and I hung up, and I did not think about it again. Not once, Boyd said. Not once. For 4 months. For 4 months. Victoria. Boyd's voice was not unkind, which somehow made it worse. There was a man in your lobby yesterday morning holding the answer in a folder. Yes. And you laughed. Yes. Why? Victoria Sterling was quiet for a long moment. Because he was in an old jacket, she said. And I had already decided what that meant. And I've been deciding what that means my entire life. And I have been right about it enough times to stop checking. At 6:05, the board voted. At 6:11, the vote was unanimous. At 6:14, Charles Boyd said, Victoria Sterling is suspended from all executive authority, effective immediately pending independent investigation. Claire Donovan will serve as interim chief executive. Marion County construction is halted at midnight tonight. Every worker scheduled to report is paid in full through the stoppage. At 6:16, Claire Donovan said, Add one thing to the record. Go ahead. Danny Whitcomb is reinstated effective this morning with back pay and his insurance restored retroactively, and I want the letter in his hand tonight. Claire looked around the table. He tried to tell us 3 times. 3. We had 4 separate chances to hear this from an employee for free, and it cost us nothing to listen, and we moved him to nights instead. I want that in the minutes. At 6:40 in a kitchen in Bellwood, Ohio, a phone rang, and Lily Carter grabbed it before her father could. Carter residence. Ethan reached for it. Lily. It's a lady. She says her name is Claire. He took the phone. This is Ethan. Mr. Carter, my name is Claire Donovan. As of about 20 minutes ago, I'm the interim chief executive of Aurelia Global. A breath. The site stopped. Midnight. Everybody's paid. Ethan put his hand on the counter. Mr. Carter, I'm here. I wanted you to hear it from a person and not a press release. Thank you. And I wanted to say one thing that isn't corporate. Her voice changed. I signed that certification in April. My name is on the false filing. Nobody made me. I was busy and I trusted a memo and I didn't open the file underneath it, and I've been telling myself for 2 days that being fooled is different from being at fault. A pause. It isn't. And I know that because I watched a man who doesn't even work for us drive 2 hours to open the file we had on our own server. Ethan didn't answer for a second. Ms. Donovan. Yes. Danny Whitcomb. Reinstated this morning with back pay. The letters being hand-delivered tonight. Ethan closed his eyes, and for the first time in 2 days, let out a breath all the way to the bottom. Then we're square, he said. At 7:15, Victoria Sterling walked out of the 39th floor and rode the elevator down alone. The lobby was almost empty. Almost. Ray Delgado was at the security podium, where he had been at that hour for 19 years, and he looked up when the doors opened, and Victoria stopped 6 feet from him with her badge in her hand, because there was a procedure for this, and she had written it herself. Ray. Ms. Sterling. She held out the badge. Ray took it and set it in the tray, and did not say anything unkind, and did not say anything kind either, and that was worse than both. Victoria got almost to the revolving door. Then she turned around. Mr. Delgado. Ma'am. Your son. Ray's hand stopped moving. What's his name? Marcus, Ray said. Marcus Delgado. He's 23. He was supposed to report August 4th to Bay 3. Victoria Sterling stood in the middle of a marble lobby where 33 hours earlier she had laughed at a man in an old canvas jacket, and she said, Bay 3. Yes, ma'am. That's the roof loading. I don't know about any of that, ma'am, Ray said. I just know he was going to be under it. At 7:22 that night, Victoria Sterling stood in her own lobby with her badge already in a plastic tray and could not make her feet move toward the door. He was going to be under it, she repeated. Yes, ma'am. Ray, does he know your son? He knows the job stopped. He doesn't know why. Ray straightened a stack of visitor stickers that did not need straightening. He called me at 6:30. He was worried about the paycheck. That's what he asked me. Not is it dangerous. He asked if he was still getting paid in August. Victoria's throat worked. He's getting paid. I know, the lady told me. Ray finally looked up at her. Ms. Sterling, can I say something and not get written up for it? There's nobody left to write you up. You walked past me twice a day for 11 years, Ray said. Twice a day, 1,900 times, maybe more. And yesterday morning you asked Preston why your lobby was a waiting room. He shrugged one shoulder. It's not a lobby, ma'am. It's where I work. Victoria Sterling walked out of the building she had built into a $90 billion company, and nobody held the door. At 8:40 that night, in a driveway in Marion, Ohio, a Aurelia Global Human Resources Director, who had been driving for an hour and 15 minutes, knocked on a screen door and handed an envelope to a 58-year-old welder in a Cincinnati Reds t-shirt. Danny Whitcomb read it standing up under the porch light. He read it twice. Then he said, "This says back pay." "Yes, sir." Since March. Since March. And your insurance is restored retroactive. So anything your wife paid out of pocket since April, you send us the receipts and we cut a check. Danny put his hand over his mouth. Sir, give me a second. Take your time. My wife's been splitting her pills, Danny said. Since May. She takes a half in the morning and a half at night, and she thought I didn't notice, and I noticed, and I didn't say anything because I didn't have anything to say. The HR director, who was 34 years old and had been dreading this drive, the entire way from Columbus, stood on a stranger's porch and did not have a single thing in his training that covered it. Mr. Whitcomb, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry to me, son. I got mine. Danny folded the letter. You go be sorry to whoever's next. At 11:58, the night foreman at the Marion County site walked out to the trailer with a printed order in his hand and told 210 men and women on the graveyard shift to shut it down and go home with full pay. At midnight, the horns went off, and the crane stopped, and the site went dark for the first time in 14 months. A 23-year-old ironworker named Marcus Delgado, who was not scheduled to start until August 4th, but had come out to walk the floor with his uncle, stood in the parking lot and said, "Dad's gonna lose it. He hates when they change the start date." Nobody told him anything that night. At 6:15 the next morning, Victoria Sterling did the last thing anyone advised her to do. She held a press conference. She held it in a hotel ballroom. She paid for herself with a lawyer. She hired herself because Gerald Vance had stopped taking her calls at 11 the night before, on the instruction of the audit committee. And she stood at a rented podium in front of 31 reporters and said, "I want to correct the record." She got 4 minutes in. She said the company's safety culture was the strongest in the industry. She said the state filing discrepancy was under review. She said that the events in the lobby had been mischaracterized, and that she had never been informed of any critical finding at any time. And a woman in the fourth row from the dispatch stood up and said, "Ms. Sterling, are you aware your board suspended you at 6:14 last night?" The room made a sound. "I'm aware of the board's decision." Then why are you standing here saying you were never informed when your own general counsel read a transcript of you saying, "I don't want to know," into the minutes of that meeting? Victoria's hands were on either side of the podium. "I'm not going to comment on privileged material." "It's not privileged." Claire Donovan waved it at 9 this morning and released it. Victoria said, "That's not possible." And 40 seconds later, she found out it was because a producer in the back row held up a phone with the audio playing, and the room heard a woman's voice from 4 months earlier say 6 words in a tone that was not evil, not cruel, not anything at all, except tired. "Marcus, I don't want to know." The press conference ended at 6:31. She did not take further questions. At 9:30 that morning, trading in Aurelia Global was halted for volatility for the second time in 2 days. At 9:52, it reopened and fell another 19%. By the closing bell, the company had lost $31 billion in market value in 48 hours, and every business network in America ran the same 81 seconds of footage above the same crawl, and not one of them led with the stock. They all led with the laugh. At 10:15, the Ohio Attorney General announced a criminal referral. At 10:40, the Department of Labor opened a parallel investigation into retaliation against a reporting employee. At 11:12, Marcus Hale surrendered at a federal building in Columbus with his attorney and entered a proffer agreement, and the first thing he said on the record before anyone asked him a question was, "I want it noted that Dan Whitcomb told me 3 times, and I put him on nights." At 12:30, Ethan Carter sat in his own kitchen in Bellwood and did not turn on the television. Lily came in from the living room. "It's on Channel 4. I know. Dad, they're literally talking about you. I know. Aren't you gonna watch?" "No." She stood there with the remote in her hand. "Why not?" Ethan pushed a chair out with his foot. "Sit down a minute." She sat. "You remember when your mom was sick and everybody kept sending those cards, the ones with the little Bible verses on them? There were like 100. There were 140. I counted because that's the kind of thing I do." He turned his coffee cup a quarter turn on the table. "And every one of them made me feel worse. Not because they weren't kind. They were kind. It's because every card was somebody standing outside of it looking in, and I was inside of it." "Okay. That's what Channel 4 is right now," Ethan said. "That's 140 people standing outside of it. And I don't want to get used to that feeling, kid, because it feels really good, and it isn't real, and a man can start doing things just to keep it going." Lily looked at him for a long moment. "That's really annoying," she said. "What is that you're right about it?" She set the remote face down on the table. "I already watched it 7 times at school anyway." At 1:45, Ethan's phone rang with a Columbus number, and a man's voice said, "Mr. Carter, this is Roland Bick. I'm the Regional Vice President at Delmar Freight. I'd like to talk to you about your employment status." "You mean the employment status you terminated at 8 in the morning 2 days ago?" There was a pause. "That was a mistake. That was made at a level below me by somebody responding to a letter from a law firm, and it was reversed this morning, and you have been continuously employed with no break in service, and your benefits were never interrupted." "That's a lot of words for we panicked." "Mr. Carter, we panicked." Ethan actually laughed. "All right, that's better. Come back Monday. Same route, same truck, and I'm putting you in for the safety supervisor slot that's been open since March." "I don't want the slot. Take a week and think about it." "I don't need a week. I've got about 900 pages of documents to go through with a federal investigator and a kid who's got a volleyball tournament on Saturday." Ethan stood up and looked out his kitchen window at the news van that was still parked across the street. "But Mr. Bick, I'll take the truck. I like the truck." At 3:10 that afternoon, Maya Reynolds called with the thing nobody expected. "Ethan, sit down." "I'm standing." "Sit down anyway." He sat. "They sent a structural team into Marion County last night after the stoppage. Independent court appointed out of Cleveland. They ran the roof loading calculation on Bay 3. And, Ethan, the report you carried was wrong." He went cold. "Wrong how?" "Wrong in the direction that keeps me up at night," Maya said. "Halloway Structural rated Bay 3 at 140% of design load. Their finding assumed the mechanical units were going on the north half of the span, which is what the March drawings showed. Except somebody moved the units in May. 2 air handlers and a condenser bank, all of it relocated over the center span to make room for a materials lift." Ethan closed his eyes. "What's the real number?" 206%. "Say it again." 206% of design load, Maya said. "Ethan, they didn't just hide a critical finding. They hid a critical finding and then made it worse for 4 months without rechecking it because the man who would have caught it was working nights." Neither of them said anything for a while. "When does it fail?" Ethan said. "They won't put a date on it." "Maya, they won't put a date on it in writing," she said. "But the lead engineer told me off the record that with full mechanical running and a shift change crowd standing under it, he wouldn't have wanted to be in that building past October." Ethan put his head in his hand. "August 4th was the start date," he said. "October's the shift change with a full crew under it." "Yes." 1,200 people. "Yes." At 4:22 that afternoon, A court-appointed engineer in a hard hat stood in Bay 3 with a laser level and a laptop and watched a reading he did not like. And at 4:31 he called everybody out of the building, and at 4:50, with the structure completely empty. A 40-foot section of decking over the center span dropped 11 inches and stopped. It did not collapse. It sagged. 11 inches in an empty building at 10 minutes to 5 on a Thursday 3 days after the site was shut down. The photograph of that sagged decking ran on the front page of every newspaper in Ohio, and 11 newspapers outside of it, and the caption under it in the dispatch was one sentence long. This is what he was carrying in the folder. At 6:05, Ray Delgado was at the security podium when his phone rang. "Dad?" "Hey, bud." "Dad, did you see Bay 3? Ray had seen it. Ray had been looking at it on his phone for an hour and 10 minutes with his hand over his mouth. "I saw it. That's where I was going to be." His son's voice was doing something. "Dad, that's literally my bay. That's where they put me. That's where I was going to be standing at 7 in the morning on August 4th. "I know, Marcus." "How did they know who found that?" And Ray Delgado, 19 years, a security officer in a building where nobody knew his name, said, "A guy came in here Tuesday in an old jacket and tried to hand it to us, and we put him in handcuffs." His son said, "You're kidding." "I'm not." "Dad, are you okay?" "I held the folder," Ray said, and his voice went, and he had to put the phone down on the podium for a second, and a woman coming out of the elevator saw the head of building security, standing there crying into his hand, and had the good sense to keep walking. At 8:15 that night, Victoria Sterling watched the same photograph on a television in a house in Bexley, with every light off but one. She had been suspended for 26 hours. She had not slept. She sat on the floor with her back against the couch, which she had not done since college, and she looked at 11 inches of sagged decking, and she did arithmetic. She had spent 4 months refusing to do. At 8:40, her phone rang and the screen said Charles Boyd, and she did not answer it. At 8:52, it rang again, and she answered it. "Victoria. Charlie. You've seen it. I've seen it. Full board meets Monday. Termination for cause. It's not a discussion, I'm telling you, so you're not surprised." A pause. "There'll be a clawback demand on 4 years of incentive comp, and the company will not indemnify you against the criminal referral." "I understand. Do you?" Boyd's voice for the first time had something in it besides granite. "Victoria, I've known you since you were 36 years old. I put you in that chair. Ellen Park wanted the man from Honeywell, and I told her she was wrong, and I was right for 9 years. Charlie." 11 inches, Boyd said. "That's what I keep looking at. 11 inches in an empty building." "I know. You had it in your lobby, in a folder, Tuesday morning." "Charlie, I know." "Then help me understand it. Not as a director, as a man who vouched for you for a decade." He waited. "Why did you laugh?" Victoria Sterling was quiet for 11 seconds. Then she said, "Because my father wore that jacket." Boyd said nothing. 1986, she said. Sterling Fabrication, 400 employees, Youngstown. He built brackets and stampings for the automotive supply chain, and he wore a canvas jacket with his name over the pocket, and he came home smelling like cutting oil, and he thought that meant something. Her voice was very flat. In '94, he lost the Ford contract. He sat at our kitchen table with a folder in his hands, Charlie. A folder. And he drove to Detroit 3 times to hand it to somebody, and they wouldn't take a meeting with a man in a canvas jacket, and the 4th time he didn't come home until 2 in the morning, and my mother found him in the truck in the driveway with the folder still on the seat next to him. Victoria. He didn't die that night. He died 9 years later. But that's the night it happened, she swallowed. And when I was 22, I decided that I was never going to be the person outside the door. And I got very, very good at being the person inside it. Charles Boyd let out a long breath. "So you saw a man in a canvas jacket with a folder," he said. "I saw my father," Victoria said. "And I laughed at him." At 9:04. The next morning, a Friday, Claire Donovan announced the Aurelia Worker Protection Fund seeded at $400 million, with every worker scheduled on the Marion County site, through the stoppage paid in full. Every subcontractor made whole, and an independent safety office reporting directly to the board with the authority to halt any project in the company without executive approval. At 9:31, a reporter asked, "Ms. Donovan, will the fund be administered internally?" "No." "By who then?" "That's a conversation I'm having today," Claire said, "with a person who has not agreed to it and who I expect will say no." At 2:15 that afternoon, Claire Donovan drove herself 2 hours and 11 minutes to Bellwood, Ohio, and knocked on Ethan Carter's front door. Lily answered it. "Hi, are you the lady from the phone?" "I am. Is your dad home?" "He's under the truck." Lily looked her up and down. "Are you the one who fixed it?" Claire hesitated. "I'm the one who signed the paper that made it wrong and then fixed it." Lily considered that. "Okay," she said. "That's an honest answer. Come around the side." Ethan slid out from under the truck on a creeper with grease to his elbows and did not get up. "Ms. Donovan." "Mr. Carter." "You drove 2 hours to ask me something I'm going to say no to." "I did." "Then ask it standing up so you can leave fast." Claire almost smiled. "I want you to run the fund." "No." $400 million. Independent office. You report to the board, and the board can't fire you without a supermajority and a public filing explaining why. "No." You'd have subpoena authority through our federal counterparty agreements on any Aurelia site in the country. "Ms. Donovan, you'd have the ability to stop a job." Claire took one step closer. "Any job. Any site. 22,000 people work for this company, Mr. Carter, and right now, not one of them has anybody to call." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag for a long time. "Why me?" "Because you're the only person I've met in 9 years who said no to $11 million. That's a bad reason." "It's the only reason that's ever mattered," Claire said. "Anybody can read a report. I need somebody who can't be bought, and I have exactly one confirmed sample." Ethan sat on the creeper with the rag in his hands. "Ms. Donovan, then can I tell you what I'm actually afraid of?" "Please." "I've seen this before, not this exact thing, but I've seen a company put the loud guy in an office with a title and a budget, and I've seen what happens to him in about 4 years. Ethan looked up at her. "He gets a good parking spot. He gets invited to the leadership offsite. He starts hearing the word we. And then one day, somebody hands him a memo with 4 findings on it, and he's busy and he signs it. Because he's inside the door now." Claire Donovan stood in that driveway and did not have an answer for a long moment. Then she said, "That's exactly what happened to me." "I know it is. I'm not trying to be cruel." "You're not being cruel. You're being accurate, and it's worse." She set her bag down on the hood. "So build it so that can't happen. Write the charter yourself. Put in whatever you want. Put in a rule that says the director serves 5 years, and then he's out, no extension, no exceptions, so nobody ever gets comfortable. Put in a rule that says the director doesn't attend leadership offsites. Put in a rule that says his salary is capped at the median of the workers he covers." Ethan looked up. "Say that last one again." "Cap your own salary at the median wage of the people on your sites," Claire said. "You want to know if you've drifted? Look at your paycheck. If it went up, so did theirs." Ethan Carter sat on a creeper in his own driveway, and for the first time in the entire week, did not have a ready answer. "I'd want it named after somebody," he said finally. "Name it whatever you want." "Not me." "I assumed not you." "Danny Whitcomb." Ethan stood up. "He raised it 3 times before anybody ever heard my name. All I did was carry it 2 hours in a truck. He's the one who lost his insurance for it." Claire wrote it down on the back of her own business card standing in a driveway with a pen she borrowed from a 13-year-old. At 6:15 that evening, Danny Whitcomb called Ethan and said, "They told me they want to put my name on something." "Yeah." "Ethan, I can't have that." "Why not?" "Because I gave up," Danny said, and his voice broke wide open. 3 times and then I stopped. I got moved to nights and I stopped. I sat in that diner and I handed it to you because I didn't have the guts to keep going myself. That's not a name you put on a building." Ethan was quiet. "Danny." "Don't. You want to know the truth about that diner," Ethan said. "I told you no. You remember that I said I'm not that guy anymore, and I meant it, and I was going to drive home and forget your face. You didn't. I almost did. I sat in that parking garage twice. Ethan's voice was low. Danny, you didn't give up. You handed it to the next man. That's not quitting. That's what you do when you've been carrying something for 8 months and your arms give out. You find somebody with fresh arms. He let out a breath. Every single thing that's happened this week happened because a 58-year-old welder wouldn't delete an email. Not because of me. Take the name. There was a long silence on the line. My granddaughter's going to see that, Danny said. Yeah, she is. Okay, Danny said. Okay, then I'll take it. At 9:40 that night, a car pulled up in front of a house in Bellwood, Ohio, and sat at the curb with the engine off for 18 minutes. At 9:58, Victoria Sterling got out of it and walked up a cracked concrete path to a porch light and knocked on Ethan Carter's door. Ethan opened it and did not say a word. I'm not here to negotiate, Victoria said. There's no lawyer, there's no recording. I'll stand out here. Ms. Sterling, it's 10 o'clock at night and my daughter's asleep. I know. I waited until I thought she would be. Ethan stood in his own doorway for a moment. Then he came out and closed the door behind him and sat down on the top step, and after a second, Victoria Sterling sat down on the step below him in a $4,000 coat. Coat. Say it, Ethan said. I saw Bay 3. Everybody saw Bay 3. 11 inches. Yeah. 206% of design load. Her voice was strange. I've been saying that number out loud in my car for 2 days. I keep hoping it'll start sounding like a number. Ethan didn't answer. I'm going to be indicted, Victoria said. Probably in 6 weeks. My attorneys say a false filing charge is likely and a conspiracy charge is possible, and the clawback will take about 60% of what I have, and I'll still have more money than anyone needs, which I'm told should be a comfort. Is it? No. Then why are you telling me? Victoria Sterling looked out at a dark street in a town she had never heard of before Tuesday. Because I need to ask you something, and there is not one other person alive who can answer it. Ask. When you walked into my lobby. She turned her head. Did you know I'd have you arrested? Ethan was quiet for a while. I thought there was a decent chance. You put your own hands behind your back. Yeah. Why? Because if they had to grab me, it becomes a story about a guy resisting, Ethan said. And if I do it myself, it stays a story about a folder. Victoria let out something that was not quite a laugh. You planned it. I planned that part. I didn't plan you. What does that mean? It means I figured somebody would take the folder eventually, Ethan said. I figured worst case they arrest me and some middle manager gets nervous over the weekend and calls a lawyer and it takes 6 months. I never once figured on the CEO coming down to the lobby herself. He looked at her. You didn't have to come downstairs, ma'am. You could have stayed on 41, and none of this happens the way it happened. You'd probably still have your job. Victoria Sterling sat on a stranger's steps and absorbed that. I came down because I was annoyed, she said. I know. 11 years, $90 billion, and it came apart because I was annoyed on a Tuesday. That's usually how it goes, Ethan said. Nobody's ever ruined by the big decision. They see that one coming. Victoria put her hands together in her lap. My father wore a jacket like yours. Ethan turned his head. Sterling Fabrication, Youngstown. He drove to Detroit 3 times with a folder, and nobody would take the meeting. She said it evenly, like a woman reading a filing. I told Charles Boyd about it on the phone last night, and it's the first time I've said it out loud in 30 years. What happened to him? He lost the contract, then the company, then 9 years later everything else. She looked at her hands. Mr. Carter, when you walked into my lobby, I did not see a nuisance. I want to be honest with you, because I've been dishonest with everyone else for 2 days. I saw my father. And something in me had to make it small immediately before it got any bigger. Ethan Carter sat on his own porch steps at 10:15 at night, next to a woman who had put him in handcuffs, and for a long moment he didn't say anything at all. Then he said, Ms. Sterling, can I tell you what I think, or would you rather I just be polite? Tell me. I think your father would have taken the folder, Ethan said. Victoria Sterling put her hand over her mouth and sat very still. I think a man who drove to Detroit 3 times knows exactly what it costs to drive to Detroit 3 times, Ethan said. And I think he'd have taken it out of your hand in the lobby and read it standing up. That's what I think. And I know that's the worst thing anybody said to you all week, and I'm sorry, but you asked me on my own porch at 10 o'clock at night. She didn't answer for almost a full minute. Then she stood up and straightened her coat and got her keys out of her pocket. Mr. Carter. Ma'am. For what it's worth, and I understand it's worth very little. She was not able to look at him for this part. Marcus Delgado, Ray's son. Bay 3 August 4th, 7 a.m. shift start. I have his name written on a card in my wallet, and I intend to keep it there. Ethan nodded once. That's worth something, he said. Victoria Sterling walked down a cracked concrete path to a car she would not be able to keep and drove out of Bellwood, Ohio. And Ethan Carter sat on his steps for another 20 minutes in the dark before he went inside. When he came in, the light was on in the hallway. Lily was sitting on the 3rd stair from the bottom in her pajamas, with her arms around her knees. Was that her? You were supposed to be asleep. Dad. Was that her? Yeah. What did she want? Ethan locked the door and stood there with his hand on it. She wanted somebody to tell her she's not the worst person in the world, he said. Is she? No, Ethan said. That's the part nobody's going to want to hear, kid. She's not a monster. She's just a person who got so far up in the air that she stopped being able to see anybody standing on the ground. He turned off the porch light. And that's how it always happens. Nobody's ever the villain in their own kitchen. Lily thought about it. That's sad. It is. It's still her fault. Ethan looked at his daughter sitting on the stairs at 10:40 at night, 13 years old, arms around her knees, absolutely certain. Yeah, he said. It's still her fault. At 6 on Monday morning, 3 days after a car pulled away from a house in Bellwood, the Aurelia Global Board of Directors met by video and terminated Victoria Sterling for cause. The vote took 4 minutes. Charles Boyd read the resolution himself because he said it wasn't right to hand it to somebody else, and when he finished, Ellen Park said, "Charlie, do you want a minute?" "No." "Take a minute." "Ellen, if I take a minute, I'll take an hour." Boyd set the paper down. Next item. At 9:15, the company issued a 2-sentence statement. At 9:17, Victoria Sterling issued a 1-sentence statement of her own, which her attorneys had begged her not to issue, and which said only, "I accept the board's decision, and I do not contest it." At 10:40, a reporter asked Claire Donovan whether the company would indemnify its former chief executive. "No." "Any comment on that?" "Yes," Claire said. "The people who paid for what happened here are welders and ironworkers and their families, and they didn't get indemnified either." At 11:50 on Thursday of that same week, a federal grand jury in the Southern District of Ohio returned a 9-count indictment. Marcus Hale, 5 counts. 2 operations managers, 3 counts each. Victoria Sterling, 4 counts, including one that carried a statutory maximum of 20 years. At 12:20, Ethan Carter was under a truck at a freight yard in Bellwood when his phone buzzed on his chest, and he read the alert lying flat on his back on a creeper with a wrench in his hand, and he didn't feel anything he expected to feel. He called Maya. "You see it?" "I saw it." 4 counts. 4 counts. "Maya, I'm going to say something and you're going to think I've lost my mind." "Go ahead." "I don't want her to go to prison." There was a long pause on the line. "Ethan." "I'm not saying she shouldn't. I'm saying I don't want it." He sat up on the creeper. "I've been sitting with this all week and I finally figured out why. It's because the second she goes to prison, everybody gets to say the bad person got caught and the system worked and we can all go back to sleep. And there were 40 people on that balcony, Maya. 40. Not one of them made a phone call in 4 months either. That's the most unpopular opinion I've ever heard from a witness. I know it. Don't say it in a deposition. I'm not going to say it in a deposition. I'm saying it to you." At 2 o'clock that afternoon, Maya Reynolds hung up the phone and sat in a rented office in Alexandria and thought about a man on a creeper for a long time before she got back to work. At 9, The next Monday morning, the Daniel Whitcomb Worker Safety Office opened with one employee, one laptop, and a charter that ran to 11 pages, every word of which Ethan Carter had written himself at his own kitchen table, with a 13-year-old doing algebra across from him. The charter said the director served 5 years, no extension, no exception. It said the director did not attend leadership meetings, off-sites retreats, or strategy sessions. It said the director's compensation was set at the median wage of the hourly workforce covered by the office adjusted annually, and that any increase to the director's pay required a corresponding increase to the median. It said the director could halt any project at any Aurelia site in the United States immediately in writing, and that the halt stood until an independent engineer released it, and that no officer of the company could reverse it. It said the director could be removed only by a supermajority of the board, with a public filing stating the reason. And on page 11, in a paragraph that 3 separate lawyers asked to have removed it, said that any employee who reported a safety concern in writing to the office was protected from termination, reassignment, schedule change, or shift change for 18 months, and that any manager who did those things anyway forfeited that year's incentive compensation in full. Gerald Vance, who was still general counsel and had gotten 12 hours of sleep in 2 weeks, read page 11 and called Claire Donovan. "Claire, he's written a provision that punishes managers personally." "I know. You can't sign that." "Watch me." "Claire, the operations leadership will revolt." "Good," Claire said. "Then I'll know who they are." At 10:15 on the second Monday, a vice president of operations named Doug Farrow sent an email to 11 people calling the charter unworkable. And at 10:40, Claire Donovan forwarded that email to the entire company with 3 words on top of it. Read page 11. Doug Farrow resigned on Friday. Nobody replaced him. At 7:10 on the morning of August 4th, the date that had been circled in the mind of every person in this story for 2 months, Ray Delgado's son reported to the Marion County site. Bay 3 had been torn out and rebuilt. The mechanical units were on the north half of the span where the March drawings put them. There was a new independent inspector on site who did not report to the site director and could not be moved to nights. Marcus Delgado clocked in at 7:10 and stood in a bay that had sagged 11 inches in an empty building and looked up at it for a while. Then he went to work. At noon, he called his father on his lunch break. "Dad, you all right?" "Yeah, it's fine. It's normal." A pause. "Dad, is that guy ever gonna come out here?" "What guy?" "The folder guy." Ray Delgado stood at a security podium on a marble floor and said, "I'll ask him." At 2:30 that afternoon, Ethan Carter got a phone call from a security officer he had met exactly twice. "Mr. Carter, this is Ray Delgado." "Ray. My son wants to know if you'd come out to the site sometime." Ethan didn't answer right away. "Mr. Carter." "Ray, can I be honest with you? I'd prefer it. I don't want to go out there and have people shake my hand," Ethan said. "I've been dodging that for 2 months. Every time somebody shakes my hand, I feel like I'm getting paid for it, and I said no to $11 million, so I'd hate to sell it for a handshake." Ray was quiet for a second. "He's not going to shake your hand," Ray said. "He's 23. He's going to say hey, and then he's going to feel weird, and then he's going to go back to work. That's the whole thing." Ethan laughed once. "All right," he said. "That I can do." At 6:15 on a Thursday in late September, the first real test came, and it did not come from Marion County. It came from a coating plant in Ashtabula that Ethan had never visited in a division that had nothing to do with any of it, where an hourly operator named Terrence Wills sent a 2-paragraph email to the office at 11 at night, describing a ventilation system that had been running with 2 of 6 extractors offline since June. Ethan read it at 6:15 the next morning and drove 3 hours. At 10:40, he stood in a plant manager's office with a printout in his hand. "How long have the extractors been down?" "They're not down, they're derated." "Mr. Kessler, I'm going to ask you again, and I want you to hear that I'm asking you kindly. How long have 2 of the 6 been offline?" The plant manager, whose name was Bill Kessler, and who had run that plant for 16 years, sat back in his chair. "You want to know what I think?" "Sure." "I think a guy got his picture in the paper, and now he's driving around Ohio with a clipboard." "That's fair," Ethan said. Now answer the question. Since June. Thank you. Ethan wrote it down. Air sampling. We do quarterly. When was the last one? Kessler didn't say anything. Mr. Kessler. March. Ethan put his pen down. You're going to stop the line, he said. Kessler stood up. The hell I am. Not you, me. I'm stopping it as of right now in writing, and it stays stopped until an independent industrial hygienist tells me what those men have been breathing since June. Do you have any idea what that line does in a day? No. $2.1 million. Okay. Okay. Kessler came around the desk. Carter, you can't just... Page 4 of the charter, Ethan said. You want to read it? I've got a copy in my truck. I've got about 40 copies in my truck, honestly, because I keep giving them away. At 11:15, the Ashtabula line stopped. At 11:40, Ethan Carter's phone rang and the screen said a Charleston area code. This is Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Charles Boyd. Ethan sat down on the tailgate of his truck. Admiral? I understand you've stopped a coating line. I have. Do you know that division is under an earn-out agreement that expires on the 30th? I don't know what that means. It means if that line doesn't run at capacity through the end of the month, this company forfeits $190 million. Boyd's voice was perfectly level. Not delayed. Forfeits. Ethan looked out at a parking lot in Ashtabula. Admiral, I appreciate you calling me directly instead of going around me. I don't go around people. I know it. That's why I'm going to be straight with you. Ethan took a breath. Sir, I've been in this job for 8 weeks, and this is the phone call. This is it. This is the one where I find out whether that charter is a document or a decoration. Boyd was quiet. Are those men in danger? I don't know yet. That's the point. Nobody's measured the air in that building since March, and 2 of 6 extractors have been offline since June. And I've got 51 hourly employees who've been in there 8 hours a day the whole time. Ethan's voice didn't rise. So I don't know if they're in danger, and I'm not willing to be a man who finds out in October. There was a long silence on the line. How long for a hygienist? Boyd asked. 4 days if I can get Cleveland. 9 if I can't. Get Cleveland. I'll pay the rush. Ethan blinked. Admiral. Mr. Carter, I sat in a room in June and voted to fire a woman I hired over 11 inches of decking in an empty building. Boyd's voice for 1 second was not level at all. You think I'm going to call you about $190 million I called to find out if you'd fold? Good day. The line went dead. The earnout was forfeited on the 30th. The air sampling came back on the 4th of October and showed isocyanate concentrations at 4 times the permissible exposure limit in the south end of the building, and 31 of the 51 men in that plant were sent for pulmonary function testing, and 8 of them had numbers that a doctor in Cleveland described in writing as consistent with occupational exposure, and every one of those 8 got treatment paid in full, and none of them lost a shift of pay for it. Terrence Wills, the operator who sent the 2-paragraph email at 11 at night, was promoted to lead in November. Bill Kessler forfeited his incentive compensation for the year under page 11, which came to $84,000, and he called Ethan Carter in December and said the single most surprising sentence Ethan heard the entire year. Carter, I want to say 2 things, and then I'm hanging up. All right. 1, I still think you're a pain in my ass. Noted. 2. A long pause. My brother did coatings for 26 years in Lorraine, and he's on oxygen at night now, and he's 61 years old, and I've been telling myself for 16 years that it was different back then. Kessler's voice went rough. It wasn't different, was it? No, sir. Yeah. Another pause. Send me 40 of those charters. I want one on every board in this plant. At 9 in the morning on the 11th of February, in a federal courtroom in Columbus, Victoria, Sterling pled guilty to 1 count of making a false statement to a federal agency and 1 count of conspiracy. She did not go to trial. Her attorneys had a real defense and told her so. She took the plea over their written objection, and the objection is in the file because they made her sign it at the sentencing hearing. On the 3rd of April, the government called 2 witnesses, and the defense called none, and then the judge asked whether the defendant wished to be heard. Victoria Sterling stood up. She had prepared a statement. Her attorneys had written it. She left it on the table. "Your Honor, I'm not going to read what's in front of me." The judge, whose name was Patricia Umo, and who had been on the bench for 19 years, said, "Then say what you'd like to say. I'm going to say 4 names if that's all right." "Go ahead." Daniel Whitcomb. Victoria's hands were on the table. "He told my company 3 times. He was 58 years old, and his wife was cutting her pills in half because we took his insurance for it, and he was right, and we moved him to nights." The room was completely silent. Marcus Delgado, 23 years old. He was scheduled to report to Bay 3 on August 4th at 7 in the morning. He is a security officer's son, and I walked past that security officer 1,900 times and never learned his name. She stopped for a second. Renata Osai, from our internal audit group, who sent a document to a newspaper knowing it would cost her a career, and it didn't, and that's luck, and she didn't know it was going to be luck when she pressed send. And the 4th, Judge Umo said. Ethan Carter, Victoria said, who drove 2 hours and 11 minutes to hand me the answer, and who I had arrested in my own lobby, and who I laughed at in front of my employees because of what he was wearing. She looked up. Your Honor, I've read the sentencing memorandum from the government, and it describes me as motivated by greed. I want to say on the record that that's wrong, and I'm not saying it to help myself. I wasn't greedy. I was busy. I had 18 days to a financing close, and a man tried to tell me there was a problem, and I told him I didn't want to know, and then I went to a dinner, and I don't remember what the dinner was. Judge Umo looked at her for a long moment. Ms. Sterling, in 19 years, I have never had a defendant tell me that the government's theory was too flattering. It's not flattering, Your Honor. It's just easier. Victoria's voice was steady. Greedy people are rare. Busy people are everywhere. If everyone in this room walks out of here believing I was a greedy woman, then nobody in this room learns anything, and it happens again in a building none of us have heard of yet. She sat down. Victoria Sterling was sentenced to 26 months. The clawback took 61% of her net worth. She kept a house in Bexley, and a great deal of money by any standard a human being would recognize, and she lost the only thing she had ever actually spent her life accumulating, which was the assumption that she was the most important person in any room she chose to enter. At 4:10 that afternoon outside the courthouse, a reporter got to Ethan Carter on the sidewalk. Mr. Carter, 26 months. Is that justice? Ethan stopped walking. I don't know, he said. You don't know. No, ma'am, I don't. I'm not a judge, and I've never been one. He shifted the bag on his shoulder. But I'll tell you what I do know. 1,200 people went home at the end of a shift that they were never going to go home from, and they don't know it, and they never will. And that's exactly how it should be. That's what winning looks like in my line of work. Nothing happens, and nobody finds out, and everybody's annoyed about the schedule. Mr. Carter, one more. Do you forgive her? Ethan stood on that sidewalk for a second. That's not my job, he said. I've got 51 guys in Ashtabula, and 8 of them have lung numbers I don't like. Forgiveness is above my pay grade, and my pay grade is public, and it's $43,000 a year. At 11:20 on a Tuesday in June, 11 months and 1 week after the day the handcuffs went on, Ethan Carter walked into the lobby of Aurelia Global to deliver a quarterly report he was required by his own charter to hand to the board in person. He was wearing the jacket. He was always wearing the jacket. It was the only good jacket he owned, and Lily had made him get the elbow patched instead of replacing it, and she'd been right about that the way she was right about most things. Ray Delgado was not at the podium. Ray Delgado had retired in April with 19 years and 8 months, and the company had thrown him a party. He complained about for a week, and Claire Donovan had come down from the 39th floor and stood in the lobby and said his name out loud 11 times in a 4-minute speech on purpose, and Ray had cried again and been furious about it. The young man at the podium now was 24 and had been on the job for 6 weeks. He watched a man in a faded canvas jacket and resoled boots walk across a marble lobby toward the elevators, and he stood up because that was what you did. Sir, do you have an appointment? Ethan stopped and turned around. I do. 39th floor, 1130. Can I get your name? Ethan Carter. The young guard typed it in, and then he stopped typing, and he looked at the screen, and then he looked up. He'd been 6 weeks in that building. 6 weeks was long enough. Everybody in that building told a new hire the same story in their first week, and they always told it standing right about where he was standing. Sir, he said, are you? Probably. Behind the young guard, a woman from accounts payable, who had been at Aurelia Global for 11 years and had been standing on the mezzanine on a Tuesday morning the previous July, said, That's him. Ma'am, That's him, she said again. The young guard looked back at Ethan Carter, and he did not know what to do with his hands. Sir, can I ask you something? I'm new. Go ahead. They all tell it different. The kid swallowed. Some people say you were a lawyer. Somebody told me you were a reporter. Somebody said you were an executive here and got fired. Which one's true? And the woman from accounts payable, who had been standing 40 feet up with her phone in her hand, while a man put his own wrist together behind his back, answered before Ethan could. None of them, she said. That man walked into this building with nothing, and he walked out of it carrying the truth. Ethan Carter looked at the floor for a second. Ma'am, that's very kind, he said, and it's not true either. He turned back to the kid. I was a guy with a folder. That's the whole story. Somebody handed me a piece of paper, and I was too stubborn to put it down. That's it? That's it. Everybody wants it to be more than that. Ethan shifted the bag on his shoulder. Son, what's your name? Tyler. Tyler, how long you been here? 6 weeks. You're going to work here a long time probably, and one of these days somebody's going to come through that door who doesn't look like he belongs in here. Ethan nodded toward the revolving door. And you're going to have about 4 seconds to decide what that means. That's the whole job. That's my whole job too, and I've got a charter and a budget, and I still just get 4 seconds. Tyler looked at him. What do I do? Take the folder, Ethan said. You don't have to believe it. Just take it and write down that you took it and hand it to somebody who can read. He started toward the elevator, then stopped. And Tyler. Sir, learn everybody's name. Everybody. The night cleaners, the guy who does the water filters, all of them. Ethan's voice was quiet. The man who used to stand where you're standing worked here 19 years, and the woman on the 41st floor didn't know his name, and that's the actual reason we're all having this conversation. At 11:30, Ethan Carter handed the board a 40-page quarterly report. It contained 4 site halts, one of which had cost the company $9 million, 106 written employee reports, and the disclosure that 2 managers had forfeited incentive compensation, under page 11. Ellen Park read the last page and said, Mr. Carter, 106 reports. Last year the number was 3. Yes, ma'am. Is the company getting more dangerous? No, ma'am, Ethan said. The company's getting more honest. Those 106 things were already happening. Nobody had a phone number. He was out of the building by 12:15. He did not stay for lunch. It was in the charter. At 4:20 in the afternoon on the 14th of June, 3 years and 2 months after a woman in a charcoal suit laughed in a marble lobby. Ethan Carter sat in a folding chair on a high school football field in Bellwood, Ohio, with a program in his hand that he had already folded and unfolded about 9 times. Danny Whitcomb sat on his right because Danny had driven up for it and had not been given a choice about coming. Maya Reynolds sat on his left in from Virginia, in sunglasses, pretending she wasn't emotional about a child she'd met 4 times. Ray Delgado sat behind them with his son Marcus, 26, now a foreman who had said hey to Ethan Carter exactly once at a job site, and then felt weird and gone back to work exactly like his father predicted. Carter, Danny said. You all right? I'm fine. You're breathing like a man carrying a couch. I'm fine, Danny. They read the names alphabetically, and it took a while, and when they got to the C's, a young woman walked across a stage in a green gown, and the announcer said, Lily Sarah Carter. And a man in an old canvas jacket on a hot afternoon in June, with his hands shaking the way they had shaken on a Tuesday morning in a kitchen a lifetime earlier, stood up and clapped and could not make a sound come out of his throat. Danny Whitcomb stood up next to him and hollered loud enough to embarrass everybody in a 4-row radius. Afterward on the grass, Lily came through the crowd with her cap in her hand and hugged her father hard enough to knock the wind out of him. "Dad, Dad, you're crying." "I'm not. You're extremely crying. It's allergies. It's June. There's a lot going on in June." She pulled back and looked at him, 18 years old, exactly her mother's face, exactly her mother's steadiness. "Dad, can I tell you something and you can't get weird? No promises. Mrs. Alvarez made us write an essay senior year about a person we admire." Lily turned the cap over in her hands. "Everybody wrote about their mom or Simone Biles or whatever. I wrote about you." Ethan looked at the grass. "Lily, you want to know what I wrote?" "Not really. Too bad." She lifted her chin. "I wrote that my dad was offered $11 million when he was unemployed, and I was 13, and he said no, and I didn't find out about the 11 million part until I was 15, because he never told me." Her voice wobbled. "I wrote that I used to think being brave meant not being scared, and then I watched my dad be scared in our kitchen at 5:40 in the morning and go anyway." Ethan put his hand over his eyes. "Dad?" "Give me a second." "Take your time," Lily said, which is what he had said to her about 900 times. Then she said, "Mom would have been so loud today. She'd have been the loudest person on this field. It would have been humiliating. She'd have brought a sign. She'd have brought 2 signs." Lily laughed, and then she cried. And then Danny Whitcomb came over with his granddaughter, who was 11 now, and handed Lily a card with $60 in it that Ethan tried to refuse on her behalf and got overruled on immediately. "Mr. Whitcomb, this is too much." "Sweetheart, it's $60. "Still." "Young lady," Danny said, "your daddy drove 2 hours in a truck with 180,000 miles on it because I asked him to, and I lost my job over it, and my name's on a building." He put his hat back on. "Take the $60. At 6 that evening, they went to a diner off Route 42, 7 of them, in a booth built for 6, and Ethan Carter paid for it with a debit card attached to an account funded by a salary set at the median wage of the hourly workforce he covered, which that year had gone up $2.11 an hour, and so had his. At 8:40, driving home with the windows down, Lily said, "Dad, can I ask you the thing I've never asked you?" "Ask it." "When you were standing in that lobby, and she was laughing at you, and everybody was filming." She looked over at him. "What were you actually thinking, like, really? Not the news answer." Ethan drove for about a quarter mile before he answered. "I was thinking about your mother's shoes." "What?" "When she was sick the last 2 weeks, she couldn't get her shoes on by herself. So I did it, every morning. And she'd say thank you every single time like I was a stranger doing her a favor, and it about killed me." His hands were steady on the wheel. "And I remember standing in that lobby with those cuffs on, and I thought I have already done the hardest thing I will ever do in my life, and I did it in a bedroom where nobody was filming, and there was no press and no lawyers and nobody clapped." Lily didn't say anything. "So a woman in a nice suit laughing at my jacket." Ethan shook his head slowly. "Kid that wasn't even in the top 1,000. They drove the rest of the way with the radio low. Victoria Sterling served 19 months and was released. She never worked in a public company again and never asked to. She kept a card in her wallet with a name on it, and as far as anyone knows, she keeps it there still. Aurelia Global rebuilt Bay 3, paid every claim, and remains the only company of its size in America whose safety office cannot be overruled by its own chief executive. Danny Whitcomb retired at 63 with his insurance intact and his wife taking whole pills. Ray Delgado's son goes to work every morning under a roof that holds. And Ethan Carter still drives the same truck, still lives in the same house in Bellwood, Ohio, and still keeps the folder from that Tuesday in a drawer in his kitchen, because a man ought to remember what the thing looked like before anybody believed him. He was never the most powerful person in the room. He was never the richest, the loudest, or the best dressed. He was a single father in an old work jacket who was handed the truth by a welder in a diner and refused to put it down. And 11 months later, 1,200 people walked out of a building they were never supposed to walk out of, and not one of them will ever know his name. That was the point. That was always the point. And that is why the quietest man in the lobby brought down an empire that laughed at him.